Babylon the Great by our brother in Christ, I.A. Sadler, and we are on chapter 17. Did I write 17? I believe I did. This one is entitled Fascism, sequel to Communism. After the failure of communism to carry out the plans of the Jesuits and the Vatican, a new scheme was seized upon to avenge the Vatican following the First World War. This was the promotion of fascism and Nazism. The Vatican sought to ride upon the back of this monster as the woman rode the beast in Revelation 17. In remaining chapters, we will see further how evil men, unbeknown to them, have fulfilled scriptural prophecy. In this chapter, we will summarize the main features of fascism and its connections with the Church of Rome. A detailed historical account would be out of place here, but those who wish to look into the matter further or who simply disbelieve these things are directed to the references given. Almost all of the references are in print and available. They give extensive details from photographs, eyewitness accounts, and contemporary documents, proving the Vatican's involvement in what is probably the greatest religious atrocity in history. The numbers murdered in the years 1939 to 1945 on account of their religion far exceeded the worst excesses of the Spanish Inquisition or the St. Bartholomew's Day massacre of 1572. The genocide of the Second World War is commonly reported today as being solely motivated by racial hatred. However, this will not bear testimony of history. The Vatican and Mussolini. Fascism is portrayed in our present day as the exact opposite of communism. However, popular political classifications of left and right are misleading. There are far more similarities between fascism and communism than most would credit, but this is to be expected given their common ancestry. Atkinson's defines the relationship between fascism and communism as follows. Fascism, in its economic and social structures, unites both state socialism and corporatist capitalism. By taking the worst of both socialism and capitalism, it constructs a powerful collectivist state in which the individual has no role except as a devotee of an approved movement or corporate body. Such absolute power of organizations over the individual is also a persistent characteristic of the Church of Rome. The small step from Marxism to fascism is shown by the actions of the Italian dictator Mussolini. During the First World War, he was a leading Marxist campaigner. Subsequently, in 1919, he founded the fascist group or party, which was based upon essentially communist principles. However, a secret deal was struck soon after the Vatican and Mussolini was soon struck after between the Vatican and Mussolini. In return for the Vatican's support for the fascist party, Mussolini agreed to advance the Vatican to the prominent position in Italy it had enjoyed prior to 1870. Enjoyed prior to 1870. The main agent in facilitating the union between the Vatican and Mussolini was his Jesuit father confessor, who was under special orders from the general of the Jesuits, von Lechowski. Lechowski? To ensure Mussolini gained absolute power, the Catholic Party, led by the Romanist priest Don Sturzo, supported Mussolini in the Italian parliament. In 1926, the Catholic Party disbanded on the orders of the Pope. In the years that followed, Mussolini became Rome's secular arm against its enemies. Freemasons, Jews, and Protestants suffered in varying degrees under him. Mussolini's black shirts, so called on account of their black uniform, which resembled the black dress of the Jesuits, were a militia based upon the same type of discipline and rule as that of the Jesuits. Mussolini's black shirts were responsible for a trail of brutality and murder against any who dared to oppose them. The very name fascism has strong connections with pagan Roman authority. Tupper Saucy explains that it is derived from the Latin word faces, which is the name for the Roman legal device of an axe head whose handle is a bundle of rods tightly strapped together by a red sinew. It symbolizes the ordering of priestly functions into a single infallible sovereign. The consummation of the Vatican's support for fascism was the Concordat, or Treaty, of 1929 between Italy and the Vatican. This granted to the Pope the territory of Vatican City, thus restoring the temporal power of the Pope as an absolute monarch. The Concordat also granted a vast amount of money, financial benefits, and securities from the Italian state to the Church of Rome. This gave to the Pope a power base with which to expand Romanism throughout Europe and the world. The granting of nationhood to the Vatican City gave immense privileges to the Pope. He was now a head of state. His ministers could be treated as diplomats, enjoying freedom of passage and immunity in foreign countries. The donation of wealth from Italy to the Vatican in 1929 was entrusted to a banker named Noguera. He was allowed to engage in all manner of financial speculation, completely divorced from any religious considerations. However, his investments were so spectacular that they bore the hallmark of inside knowledge. In particular, the Vatican made a fortune by investing in war industries in the run up to the Second World War. Its special status as an officially neutral nation and its activities in war relief allowed the Vatican to transfer funds between the opposing sides in the war, so as to ensure its investments ended up on the winning side. Mussolini's donation to the Pope has become the foundation of the Church's current financial influence and control, which has grown enormously since 1929. The fascist regime of Mussolini became the springboard for the rise of fascism throughout Europe. One important example is that of Croatia. Mussolini had ambitions of Italian domination in the Balkans. Both Mussolini and the Vatican had a common enemy in the Serbs and the new state of Yugoslavia. Mussolini directly supported the fervently Romanist Utashi, who was a fascist Croatian terrorist group led by Pavelic. The Utashi campaign of terror included the murder in 1934 of the King of Yugoslavia and the French Foreign Minister of Marseilles, as well as other acts of terror and assassination in Yugoslavia itself. The aim was the destruction of the Yugoslav state and the formation of the Romanist state of Croatia, of which we will say more presently. Hitler's Third Reich. During the early period of Mussolini's rule, Germany was still reeling from financial disaster in the aftermath of the First World War. The widespread sense of humiliation and despair was used by various revolutionary groups to advance their cause. One of these was the National Socialist German Workers' Party, or Nazi Party, led by Hitler. This was at first a regional party in Bavaria, which called for separation from Germany. This policy fitted the concept of a bloc of Romanist nations in Central and Eastern Europe, espoused by the Jesuit general von Ledowski. Paris provides considerable evidence to show that Hitler was strongly influenced by the Church of Rome and supported by agents of the Vatican. At the time of Hitler's rise in Bavaria, the papal nuncio, the Pope's official representative in this part of Germany, was Pacelli, who was later to become Pope Pius XII in 1939. Hitler owed his spectacular rise to the aid of the Church of Rome, and in particular to Pacelli. Shortly before Hitler's rise to power, Pacelli became nuncio in Berlin. This coincided with Hitler's ambitions rising to encompass the whole of Germany. In 1933, Hitler became German Chancellor. This was achieved not only through the Nazis' many acts of intimidation, but in large part due to the increasingly open support of leading figures in the Church of Rome and the Jesuits. Apart from Pacelli, a key supporter of Hitler was the Pope's privy chamberlain von Papen, who was a leading figure in the Romanist Zentrum or Center Party. Von Papen forged an alliance with Hitler so that when Hitler became chancellor, von Papen was his deputy. With a combined vote of the Nazi Party and the Center Party, Hitler and von Papen dismantled the German constitution and democracy in 1933, establishing a one party Nazi state known as the Third Reich. The new Nazi government was also quick to sign a concordat with the Vatican. This granted special privileges to the Church of Rome within Germany. Von Papen boasted to the world, the Third Reich is the first power, which not only recognizes, but puts into practice the high principles of the papacy. Indeed, the very term Third Reich speaks of the rebirth of the Holy Roman Empire. This was given great impetus by the union of Austria and Germany in 1938, achieved by Nazi subversion of Austria and the active support of the leading Romanist and Jesuit bishops in Austria. This act was significant, for it rejoined the two great Germanic nations once more. The crown and scepter of the Holy Roman Empire were paraded at the Nazi Party Congress in 1938, symbolizing Hitler's vision of a Romanist Europe ruled by Germany. Hitler's brutal regime was an attempt to establish by force a united Europe. This was another form of the New World Order, but one that centered around Germany. In Chapter 19, we will see how the Nazi concept has been carried forward, albeit in modified form, as the European Union. We will see that there are disturbing similarities between the Third Reich and the European Union. Franco's Spain. From Italy and Germany, the fascist terror spread to Spain in 1936. In the preceding years, many in Spain had turned against the excesses and corruption of the Church of Rome, demanding a secular government. The Spanish Republic began to restrict the overbearing influence of the Church over all aspects of Spanish life. The vast wealth of the Church of Rome and the Jesuits in Spain came under severe threat. In response, the Vatican and the Jesuits took fearful revenge on those who had sought to reform the activities of the Church of Rome. The Vatican's man to perform this was General Franco, backed by Hitler and Mussolini. In 1936, Franco invaded Spain from Morocco with a largely Muslim army, but with the full backing of the leadership of the Church of Rome. Riviera reveals that Muslim support for Franco was greatly agreed between the Vatican and Muslim leaders, again showing the subtle links between the two religions. Franco's final victory in 1939 was as a direct result of military support from Hitler. The Spanish Civil War left multitudes dead. Many were professing Romanists who had opposed the purposes of Rome and the Jesuits. Death of Pius XI. It is apparent in 1938 that the aging Pope Pius XI was expressing deep regret for his support of Nazism and fascism. There were many in the Church of Rome who were suffering, and voices were being raised by pro communist elements in the Church of Rome for the Pope to change policy. This would have meant breaking with the pro Nazi stance of Pacelli. Pius XI had prepared a statement denouncing Hitler and Mussolini, which he was to read personally on 12 February 1939. However, just prior to this date, his health rapidly declined and he died on 10 February. Manhattan goes beyond drawing simple parallels with the murder of Clement XIII and the 14th on account of their decision to suppress the Jesuits. He provides evidence to substantiate the claim that the decline in the health of Pius XI was deliberately speeded up. It is likely that Hitler's agents in the Vatican were involved. Following the death of Pius XI, the pro Nazi Pacelli was elected Pope Pius XII on 2nd March 1939. The way was set for Hitler's onslaught to gain momentum. Tiso's Slovakia. Only a matter of days after Pacelli became Pope Pius XII, Hitler invaded Czechoslovakia. The nation of Czechoslovakia was created after the First World War to the distaste of the Vatican was broken up. Slovakia became a puppet Nazi state led by the Jesuit prelate Tiso. As head of Slovakia Nazi Party, the Jesuit Tiso declared Catholicism and Nazism have much in common, and they work hand in hand to reform the world. Tiso has the dubious distinction of being the first Nazi leader to deport Jews to Auschwitz. Tiso did not only deport Jews from Slovakia to the concentration camps, but also influential Protestants. The final act of aggression that ignited the Second World War was the German invasion of Poland. Britain and France finally awoke to Hitler's true policies after a period of appeasement led by Charlotte Chamberlain, the British Prime Minister. It is important to note that Germany's invasion of Poland was tacitly supported by the Vatican, despite the great suffering of a largely Romanist population. Not only did the Spaniards, but also the Poles have to suffer and be sacrificed as pawns for the supposed greater glory of God. The involvement of the Church of Rome is supported of Hitler is apparent through its role in the collapse and betrayal of France and Belgium in 1940. Paris, as a Frenchman, provides withering evidence of the role of Rome and the Jesuits. We have not space to go into this other than to point out that Belgians, Nazis were known as Rexits. This name came from the Romanist group Christus Rex, Latin for Christ the King, which paved the way for Hitler's invasion of Belgium. The Croatian Holocaust. In 1941, Germany invaded Yugoslavia. Despite brave resistance, the nation and government had been infiltrated and quickly collapsed. In this section, we will just give a brief summary of what followed. Whole books have been written by Paris, Manhattan, and others on this subject. The events are described in detail, supported by eyewitness accounts, contemporary Croat newspapers, documents, and photographs. Much of this information is too shocking to include here, but if the reader is in doubt, let him read Paris and Manhattan and weigh up the evidence. Those that supported Hitler's invasion of Yugoslavia were mostly Croats. Almost all Croats were devout Romanists. It was at this point that the Utashi terrorists led by Pavlik came to the fore. Pavlik became head of a new puppet fascist state called the Independent State of Croatia. Pavlik had the full and public support of Stefanik, the Jesuit Archbishop of Zagreb, along with the hierarchy of the Church of Rome. The state of Croatia was more extensive than that of today. It has covered much of the present territory of Bosnia. Within days of the formation of the fascist Croatian state, a murderous reign of terror began against not only Jews and Gypsies, but also the large Serbian minority. The persecution was not just racial, but was religious, since the Serbs were members of the Eastern Orthodox Church. The Orthodox clergy were systematically murdered, followed by multitudes of men, women, and children. Church buildings were destroyed. Often the means of killing were brutal and sadistic in the extreme. The Romanist clergy and monks were foremost in encouraging and even participating in these atrocities. One of the most notorious examples was Franciscan brother Filipovich, who became a chief of the Jazovac concentration camp. The policy of genocide against the Serbs was supported at the highest level by the Archbishop Stefanak and the Papal Legate in Croatia. Paris and Manhattan include in their books photographs of Stefanak and the Papal Legate taking up official positions alongside top ranking Ustashi, fascist, and Nazi military officers. The aim of the reign of terror was to rid Croatia and Bosnia of Orthodox Serbs. Those Serbs that survived either fled or were forcibly converted en masse to Romanism. In total, about three-quarters of a million Serbs were murdered. The Croatian fascists had a or tenuous alliance with the Bosnia Muslims and encouraged them to participate in massacres of the local Serbian population. In revenge, groups of Serbs massacred Muslims. Let us note again a loose Romanist Muslim alliance, as we described in chapter 10 and identified in the Spanish Civil War. Thus, we see the roots of the recent bitter conflict in the former Yugoslavia. However, these facts are withheld from the public by the media, which have put a consistently pro Croat bias on the conflict. From Croatia, the onslaught moved on to Russia in 1941 with Hitler's massive invasion. This was supported by the Vatican. Copious reference to the Fatima prophecies were made to justify the war against Russia. Pope Pius XII was very prominent in his devotion to Our Lady of Fatima. Hitler's invasion was to be the tool for effecting the forcible conversion of Russia to Romanism. However, Russia withstood Hitler's attacks and ultimately inflicted catastrophic defeats on the Nazi armies. Many millions of lives was lost. Hitler and the occult. Having intimidated the connection between the Third Reich, intimidated. Yeah, is that the intimated, having intimated the connection between the Third Reich and the New World Order, it will not come as a surprise that Hitler was closely connected with the occult. Hitler's terrible deeds mark him as almost satanic. His hatred of God's national people, the Jews, was like that of Haman in the Bible. If he could, Hitler would have overturned the prophecies of Scripture by trying to destroy the entire Jewish people. Hitler was initiated into an occult by Eckhart, to whom Hitler dedicated his book Mein Kampf, which set out his blueprint for the Nazi Third Reich. Many of Hitler's close Nazi associates were also involved in the occult. These, including Hitler, were strongly influenced by Blavatsky. After the war, it was found that Hitler had a personal library of occult books, which his favorite reading being that of Blavatsky. He was profoundly influenced by Blavatsky's book, The Secret Doctrine. Hitler's abominable theories about the superiority of certain races were based on the root race theory of Eastern mysticism that Blavatsky had espoused. Variants of this are seen in the Hindu caste system. Through this, Hitler attempted to justify the Germanic races as superior and some other races, especially the Jews, as inferior and subhuman. In part, he justified his policy of extermination by the principles of evolution and the survival of the fittest. The original symbol for the Nazis was the skull and crossbone, which is of occult origin. However, this was dropped in favor of the swastika, although the skull and crossbones was later chosen for Hitler's special forces. The swastika is a form of the cross which is used in transcendental meditation. In this form of Eastern mysticism, a mantra or prayer is chanted in Sanskrit, an ancient Indian language, in front of a swastika. The prayer is to be the shining one. Hmm. The prayer is to the shining one. In other words, it is a prayer invoking Lucifer or Satan. The Nazi flag employs the swastika in the center of a white disc set in a red background. This is the appearance of the sun set in the red color of the Babylonian mysteries. It bears a striking similarity to the round cakes of Romish hosts inscribed with a cross. The swastika is also a Masonic symbol. It was chosen by the Austrian magician Lieben, Liebenfels in about 1907 as the symbol for a new occult society called the Order of the New Templars. This was a Germanic version of the Knights Templar. Hitler was one of the Liebenfels' pupils. However, the swastika was also the heraldic sign of the administrators, a Romanist priest of the abbey at Lambac, where Hitler sang as a choir boy. Again, we see the path of the occult and Rome joined up. Riviera states that other fascist leaders, as well as Pacelli, the future Pius XII, were Freemasons. Yet the fascist regimes bitterly persecuted Freemasons when in power. It is concluded that Freemasonry was used to advance fascism and the Church of Rome. Then Freemasonry was attacked as a dangerous rival. Nazism and Jesuits. We have noted that Hitler's policies before he came to power reflected the strategic aims of the Jesuit general Ledowski. We have also seen how, when in power, the fascists had close connections with Jesuit bishops and priests. However, a more fundamental connection is seen by noting that Hitler's book, Mein Kampf, was written on Hitler's behalf by the Jesuit priest Stampenfleet. Hitler is quoted by Paris as saying, quote, I learned most of all from the Jesuit order, unquote. This is further confirmed by another quote from Hitler provided by Hunt, quote, above all, I have learned from the Jesuits, and so did Lenin too, so far as I recall. The world has never known anything quite so splendid as the hierarchical structure of the Catholic Church. There were quite a few things I simply appropriated from the Jesuits for the use of the Nazi Party, unquote. Hitler's feared SS troops and the Gestapo were also closely connected with the Jesuits. Himmler, who headed the SS, was referred to by Hitler as our Ignatius of Loyola. The SS in their black uniforms were modeled on the Jesuits, and many Jesuits participated in the SS. This included Himmler's uncle, who was both a senior SS officer and a Jesuit priest. Furthermore, let us note that the symbol of the SS, the skull and crossbones, appears in the ceremony of the Jesuit oath quoted in chapter 15. The anti Semitic policies of Hitler also point to the Jesuits. For a number of years prior to the rise of Hitler, the Jesuits had been encouraging anti Semitic feelings throughout Europe. Anti Semitic or anti Semitism had been a frequent policy of the Church of Rome ever since the days of Constantine. The Romanist policy of persecution of Jews is a long and bloody one, and Hitler's Holocaust was simply an extension of it. Perverted Christianity justifies the Holocaust. The Church of Rome had long taught that the Jews deserved to die on account of their crucifixion of Jesus Christ. However, Rivera points out that behind this absurd and vile facade lay the real purpose of the Vatican, which was try to gain control of Jerusalem. The Jews who were seeking to reestablish a Jewish state in Palestine were a serious obstacle to the plans of the Vatican. The prospect of a Jewish state was also opposed by Muslims and was another uniting factor between them and the Vatican. Pierce backs the claims of Riviera concerning the links between the Vatican and Islam, stating that the Vatican's ultimate aim is to control Jerusalem. In addition to the use of evolution, Blavatsky's root race theories and Rome's anti Semitism, Hitler sought to justify the extermination of Jews by use of supposedly Protestant theologians. In Nazi Germany and other fascist states, the authorities tried to control all areas of life, including the churches. Riviera states that after 1933, the Church of Rome pursued a policy of infiltrating the Lutheran Church. This deliberate action ensured that Jews were denounced by professed Protestants as well as Romanists. As a result, Jews today widely associate the Holocaust not with Rome, but with Christianity. Independent corroboration for this is provided by the eyewitness accounts of an English lady who was trapped in Norway during the war. Shortly after the German invasion, the Norwegian Nazi leader Quisling tried to ensure that every aspect of life was run in accordance with Nazi principles. This included the Lutheran Church. However, the Lutheran bishops refused to propagate Nazi teaching. They were then removed from office and pro Nazi bishops put in their place. These substitute clergy would not oppose the brutal treatment of Norwegian Jews. However, the ordinary people shunned these false pastors. One leading German theologian who sought to justify the Holocaust was Kittel. In many ways, his theology was the same as Westcott and Hort. Similarly, Kittel was involved in the occult. From 1933 onwards, Kittel was a member of the Nazi Party, during which he publicly expounded and justified Hitler's persecution of the Jews, just as Westcott and Hort had undermined the authorized version of the Bible in English. Kittel sought to replace Luther's German translation of the Bible with a revised tainted with Gnostic bias. It was also in 1933 that Kittel started work on the Theological Dictionary of the New Testament. This great work was almost complete when Kittel was in prison for war crimes after Hitler's defeat. Nevertheless, Kittel's Greek dictionary is widely revered in evangelical theological circles and regarded today as a standard work. However, this dictionary is biased towards the occult and mystery interpretation of words. Hence, it is a powerful means of altering the pure meaning of the Word of God. The new translations of the Bible, including the NIV, so widely revealed by churches today, have been strongly influenced by Kittel's work. Little do ordinary Christians realize that Kittel produced his dictionary while promoting the Holocaust. Thus, we see that new Bible versions are not only influenced by the errors of Westcott and Hort, but also by the Nazism of Kittel. Since the war, various fascist groups have realized that trying to justify the Holocaust will not gain them support. Therefore, they have turned to denying the existence of the Holocaust, using bogus historical methods to persuade people that some form of Jewish conspiracy has concocted an enormous hoax. The vile teaching is then used to incite hatred of the Jews and other ethnic minorities. However, such teaching is often covered with a veneer of Christianity, where publications mix neo Nazi propaganda with the Bible studies. Such perversion of the gospel is alarmingly rife, and many do not realize the danger of so called Protestant publications that subtly put forth anti Jewish sentiments. The Vatican switches sides. When it became apparent in 1943 that Hitler was losing the war, the Pope and the Vatican subtly shifted policy towards the Americans so as to avoid the ultimate disaster for the papacy. The USA represented a great world power and one would carry forward the crusade against Russia and communism. The Vatican was also able to switch much of its wealth and investments to America on account of its special international status. The influence of Pius XII and Cardinal Spellman in the USA were crucial in inflaming the Cold War immediately after Hitler's defeat. Many leading figures in the USA, including John Dulles, Secretary of State, and his brother Allen Dulles, first head of the CIA, were devout Romanists. They were strongly influenced by Pius XII, Cardinal Spellman, and the Fatima prophecies. The anti Russian frenzy that they whipped up nearly brought about a nuclear conflict. In the West, the population was told of the great threat posed by Soviet communism. However, the influence of the Vatican behind the U.S. government and other Western European powers following the Vatican's previous alliance with Hitler puts a different perspective upon the Russian buildup of arms after the war. Despite the papacy switching sides to the U.S. towards the end of the war, it ensured that its faithful Nazi servants gained sanctuary following Hitler's defeat. Monasteries were extensively used to shelter Nazi fugitives. The fascist governments in Spain and in South America, which had remained officially neutral during the war, were havens for Nazi refugees. What is more sickening is that the USA and other Western agencies secretly assisted many of the fugitives to escape, including the Croatian fascist leader Pavelic. Many other Nazis were given immunity on the basis that they gave intelligence or technical assistance to the USA in the fight against communism and the Russians. The Vatican was careful to intervene regarding the Nazi and SS prisoners after the war. Although a great deal of pastoral care was given to the SS prisoners, no such concern was expressed toward their victims in the concentration camps. At the war crimes trial of Nuremberg, the Vatican interceded for many of those on trial that were Romanists. The Pope's privy chamberlain, von Papen, who was instrumental in putting Hitler into power in 1933 and who secured the Concordat with Nazi Germany, was acquitted at Nuremberg. This followed vigorous representations from the Vatican. Numerous other lesser war criminals were saved by the intervention of the Church of Rome. In communist controlled Eastern Europe, the Vatican had no such influence over the judicial process. Archbishop Stefanak was found guilty of war crimes by the Yugoslav authorities and was given a long jail sentence. In response, Pius XII excommunicated all who had participated in the trial. Stefanak was later made a cardinal and turned into an anti communist hero. Likewise, Tiso, the Jewish leader of the Slovak Nazi state, was tried and found guilty by the Czechoslovak authorities. Tiso was executed, whereupon Pius XII protested that Tiso had been a martyr for religious freedom. Since 1945, the Vatican has waged a vigorous propaganda campaign to convince people that it was not responsible for Nazism and the Holocaust. Riviere explains that during the war, the Vatican and the Jesuits laid contingency plans should Hitler be defeated. By keeping its agents on both sides of the conflict, the Church of Rome claimed that it was not directly involved and had remained neutral. Further credence was given to this by the number of imprisonment of many honorable members of the Church of Rome opposed to fascism and the Holocaust. However, we have seen previously that the Jesuits believed it was right to persecute members of their own church if it was for the greater glory of God. Despite the denials, the Vatican's guilt in respect of Nazism and the Holocaust is manifest. Nevertheless, there are important figures in the Church of Rome who disliked fascism, but they were bound to follow the Pope, who to them was in the place of God. However, the death of Pius XII in 1958 gave the opportunity for a change in policy. Absolutely crazy. All right, brothers and sisters, that ends chapter 17, I believe it was. Next time we'll pick up in chapter 18. Keep your eyes on Jesus, brothers and sisters. Your nose in the book, which is the Word of God. And embed the Word of God upon the tablets of your hearts, so you and I will not sin against God or be deceived. Till next time. Bye bye.